The cameras were rolling, the audience buzzing with anticipation, and Bill Maher leaned into his chair with that trademark smirk, the smirk that had cut down countless guests before her. But this time, it wasn't just another night of cynical one-liners and smug commentary. This time, the guest across from him wasn't laughing. It was Jasmine Crockett, known for her razor-sharp tongue and fearless confrontations. Crockett had walked onto Maher's stage with fire already burning in her eyes. She wasn't there to nod politely. She wasn't there to let his sarcasm roll unchecked. And she certainly wasn't there to be the butt of a smug monologue. The clash started small. A joke here, a jab there. But within minutes, the air in the studio shifted. The laughter thinned. The crowd exchanged nervous glances. And everyone watching could feel it. This wasn't going to end with polite applause. By the time the shouting began, by the time Crockett leaned across the table and Maher raised his hands in mock defense, the tension had boiled over. And when security finally stepped in, the unthinkable happened. Jasmine Crockett was escorted off Bill Maher's stage, live, in front of millions. No outro, no polite wave, just chaos, humiliation, and an abrupt end that left the audience stunned. The night began like so many others on Real Time with Bill Maher. The studio lights dimmed, the theme music blared, and Maher walked confidently onto the stage, waving to the cheering audience. He fired off his opening monologue with ease, sarcastic barbs, knowing smirks, each joke landing with the polished timing of a man who had built his career on sneering at power, and sometimes wielding it himself. Then came the panel. Guests filed in, each taking their seat around the table. But all eyes were drawn to Jasmine Crockett. From the moment she sat down, it was clear she wasn't intimidated by Maher, his stage, or his audience. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips, as if to say, "Go on, try me." Maher noticed it. He always did. He thrived on tension, on that flicker of resistance he could twist into comedy gold. And tonight he had the perfect foil. "So," Maher began, turning toward Crockett with that familiar condescending tilt of his head, "we're joined tonight by Representative Jasmine Crockett, the woman who has made more headlines in committee hearings than most politicians make in their entire careers." The crowd chuckled. Half amused, half intrigued, Crockett leaned in slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Headlines happen when you tell the truth," she replied smoothly. Maher smirked, holding his hands up. "Oh, don't get me wrong. I love a good soundbite. You've got the fire, no doubt about that. But sometimes I wonder if fire alone gets the job done." The audience laughed again, sensing the dig. Crockett's smirk widened, but her voice dropped lower, sharper. "Fire gets the job done when the room is full of people asleep at the wheel." The laughter faltered. A ripple of surprise ran through the audience. Maher's grin stiffened, but he pressed on, chuckling lightly. Okay, I walked into that one. But, come on. You've got to admit sometimes it feels less like debate and more like performance." Crockett leaned forward, eyes locked on him. "And what exactly do you think you're doing here, Bill?"
This isn't performance?
She gestured broadly to the cameras, the audience, the lights. "This is a stage. And every week you sit in that chair and perform cynicism like it's gospel." The crowd gasped, a sharp, collective intake of breath. Maher raised his eyebrows, feigning surprise, his smirk twitching at the corners. "Well," he said slowly, "someone came ready to fight tonight." Crockett didn't blink. "I came ready to tell the truth. If that feels like a fight, maybe you should ask yourself why." The audience erupted, a cheers, whistles, clapping. Some laughed nervously, unsure if this was still entertainment or the beginning of something far more raw. Maher chuckled again, but his eyes narrowed. "All right," he said, shifting in his chair. "Let's see how much truth we can handle tonight." The stage was set. The build-up was over. What had started as banter was about to erupt into one of the most heated altercations his show had ever seen. The atmosphere inside the studio shifted from uneasy laughter to raw silence. Bill Maher leaned back in his chair, gripping his pen like it was a weapon. His smirk, once playful, was now sharper, defensive. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her eyes blazing, her posture unyielding. "Truth," Maher repeated, rolling the word on his tongue like it was a joke. Everybody claims they're speaking the truth these days. But, Representative, sometimes what people call truth is just anger dressed up in fancy clothes. The audience chuckled nervously, but Crockett's response was immediate, cutting. And sometimes what people call comedy is just arrogance dressed up as entertainment. Gasps shot through the room. Maher's jaw tightened, his grin faltering. He tapped his pen against the desk, a rhythm he used when buying time. The silence stretched, cameras zoomed in, and Crockett didn't move. She held her gaze steady, daring him to come back harder. Maher cleared his throat, chuckling dryly. Okay, you're good. You've got the fire. But let's be real here. This is my show, my stage. You don't get to come here and lecture me like I'm one of your committee witnesses, Crockett shot back instantly. And you don't get to invite me here just to play the clown in your circus. You asked me to show up, Bill. Don't be surprised that I brought the heat. The crowd roared, half cheering, half booing. The clash was no longer subtle, no longer about ideas. It was about dominance. Maher leaned forward, his smirk returning meaner this time. You know what your problem is? You mistake volume for victory. You think shouting makes you right, but shouting just makes you loud. Crockett slammed her hand against the table, the sound cracking through the studio like a whip. And you mistake smugness for wisdom. You think sneering makes you smart, but sneering just makes you small. The audience howled, some rising to their feet. The tension was unbearable. Maher's face reddened, his pen snapping in his grip. For the first time in years, he looked shaken. His authority on his own stage challenged openly, viciously. He tried to retort, his voice rising, desperate to regain control. This isn't Congress, Representative. You don't get to scream over people here. Crockett cut him off, her voice booming, commanding the room. And this isn't your kingdom, Bill. You don't get to hide behind that desk while you belittle people who came here to be heard. Not tonight. The confrontation was no longer a segment. It was war. The studio was on fire. The band had fallen silent. The audience was split between cheering Crockett and shouting at Maher, and the producers off-camera waved their arms frantically, signaling to the cameramen to stay wide, to catch the chaos in full. Bill Maher leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, look at you! The warrior, the truth-teller, the fearless fighter? Tell me, Jasmine, do you ever get tired of playing the hero in your own movie? Crockett didn't flinch. She leaned in closer, her voice sharp, slicing through the room. Do you ever get tired of being the bully in yours? The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, claps that rattled the studio walls. Maher's face tightened, his smirk collapsing into something uglier, more exposed. He raised his hand as if to stop her, but Crockett wasn't finished. You invite people here so you can tear them down, laugh at them, make yourself look smarter. But the only person who thinks you're clever is you. And tonight, I'm not playing along. The audience screamed in approval. Maher's eyes darted toward the cameras, then back at Crockett, his pen trembling in his fingers. This is my show, he snapped, his voice cracking. And if you don't like it, you can leave. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed across the studio. Some in the audience booed. Others shouted for her to stay. Crockett's eyes widened for a moment, not in fear, but in disbelief. Then she laughed, short and sharp. Oh, so that's it, she said, standing abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. That's your big move? Kick me off because you can't handle the heat? The audience was in chaos now. Some cheering wildly, others jeering, the energy boiling over into pandemonium. Security guards edged closer to the stage. Producers shouted from the wings, their voices muffled over the roar. Maher stood too, slamming his pen down on the desk. You want heat? You brought a forest fire, and I don't let fires burn down my stage. Crockett leaned across the table one last time, her finger stabbing the air. No, Bill, you don't let anyone stand up to you. That's the difference. But tonight, you couldn't shut me up, so you're throwing me out. The crowd went ballistic. Cheers, boos, whistles. The sound was deafening. Security stepped in, placing a hand lightly on Crockett's arm. She shook them off, glaring at Maher one final time. You can kick me off your stage, she shouted over the chaos, but you'll never silence me, the audience roared. Maher sank back into his chair, his face pale but his jaw locked tight, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The cameras zoomed out, capturing Crockett being guided off the stage, the studio engulfed in pandemonium. The escalation had peaked. The altercation was over, and Jasmine Crockett was gone. The studio had become unrecognizable. What was supposed to be a late-night exchange between a seasoned host and a fiery guest had transformed into a battlefield. The audience was no longer an audience. They were a mob of voices, shouting, clapping, booing, and gasping. The band sat frozen, instruments untouched, their eyes wide, fixed on the storm unraveling in front of them. Jasmine Crockett stood tall at her chair, her body angled forward, her face set with determination. Her voice carried above the pandemonium, fierce and unyielding. "You don't intimidate me, Bill. You never did. And the truth is, you can't handle me." The crowd roared, some rising to their feet in support, others booing furiously. The sound shook the walls of the studio. Maher, still clutching the edge of his desk, leaned back as if to shield himself from the heat of her words. His smirk was gone now, replaced by a tight line of irritation, maybe even fear. He raised his hand to the audience, trying to bring them back under control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice raised, "this is supposed to be a conversation, not a circus." But Crockett cut him off, her voice booming, unstoppable. "No, Bill, this is a circus, and you're the ringmaster. Week after week you sit here mocking, sneering, pretending you're above it all. But tonight you picked the wrong guest. Tonight you can't hide behind sarcasm." The audience gasped, their noise breaking into scattered shouts. Maher leaned forward, gripping his desk, his voice sharpening. "If you think you can come on my stage and shout over me, you're wrong. This is my show, my stage, and if you can't respect that, you don't belong here." Security guards shifted at the wings, their hands on their earpieces, waiting for the signal. Producers waved their arms furiously, some shouting toward the stage, their voices lost in the roar. Crockett leaned across the table, pointing directly at Maher. "Respect goes both ways. You don't invite me here to play the fool. You don't get to sit there and cut me down while you laugh at your own jokes. I don't respect bullies. And I never will." The audience shrieked, some applauding, some booing, but all electrified by the clash. Maher's face flushed deep red. He slammed his hand flat on the desk, the crack echoing through the studio. "Enough!" he shouted. "You're done. You're off my stage." Gasps tore through the crowd. The room froze for half a second, disbelief hanging heavy in the air. The words were final, brutal, undeniable, and Jasmine Crockett, without missing a beat, fired back. "You can throw me out, but you can't shut me up." "Not now, not ever," the audience exploded. The noise was deafening. Half the room cheering her defiance, the other half screaming in shock. Security surged forward, stepping onto the stage at last. The breaking point had come. Bill Maher had lost control of his own show. The scene spiraled into chaos. Two security guards approached Crockett, their movements cautious, deliberate. They extended their arms, signaling her to step aside. She shook them off, her voice cutting through the uproar. "Don't touch me. I'll walk out when I'm ready." The audience screamed louder, their voices a relentless storm. Phones rose into the air as people tried to capture the moment, their screens glowing under the hot studio lights. Cameramen adjusted frantically, zooming out to catch everything. Crockett standing firm, Maher slouched at his desk, security closing in. Maher, his face pale now, tried to regain a shred of control. He forced a chuckle, his voice wobbling. "Well, folks, I guess this is what happens when passion turns into chaos." But no one laughed. The audience drowned him out, their voices deafening. Crockett pointed at him one last time, her words scorching. "The only chaos here is you, Bill, and the only thing you've proven tonight is that you can dish it out, but you can't take it." The crowd erupted. Some clapped wildly, others booed, but every single person was on their feet, their energy boiling over. Security moved closer, guiding Crockett toward the wings. She resisted at first, her eyes still locked on Maher, her finger still pointed like a dagger. "You don't scare me," she shouted over the roar. "You never did. Remember that." The words rang out, echoing through the studio. The guards finally guided her off, her figure disappearing into the wings as the audience shouted and screamed. Maher sank back into his chair, his hands trembling against his mug, his face stiff. He tried to smile again, but it was hollow, brittle, empty. The room still buzzed with chaos, the energy uncontrollable. The camera zoomed out one final time, catching the stage in full. Maher at his desk, rattled, the audience in pandemonium, the security staff still huddled near the exit where Crockett had just been escorted. And then, abruptly, the feed cut to black. No closing jokes. No outro, no applause. Just silence. The final image was burned into millions of screens. Jasmine Crockett, fiery and unrelenting, being led off the stage, and Bill Maher, pale and shaken, left behind in the ruins of his own show.